It's our pal, Mike Nabors. Don't quit, pivot. We've had him on multiple times throughout the years when I was at iHeart and here talking about the Saints and Bucks and just all things sports. What's going on, brother? How are you?
The hardest working man in Tampa Bay sports. I'm really enjoying what you're doing and rooting for you, my friend. I'm great. How are you?
Thank you, pal. I'm doing wonderful. We'll get to your book here momentarily. Did you get a chance to watch any of that hockey game on Saturday night?
I read about it. I did not, but
But you
it's
read about it.
yes, I did read about it. You
That's
know
the
what? This
thing.
all-star dynamic, and I know that's a little separate, but
Mhm.
it's something I guess you could talk about on your podcast. But it's amazing how a lot of these leagues can't figure it out right now.
And that's what the hockey has done by
Yeah,
doing this four nations face off and going,
yeah,
oh, yeah, you want people to care? This is what we're going to do. And
right.
we'll see what the NBA does to try to make an adjustment there because it was just another like weekend of, okay, just so many other things you can do. If they don't care, why the heck should we care? I think
Right.
that's the end all be all. Our time is so precious, our money very valuable. Mike, let's start off talking a little New Orleans Saints. I want to ask you about Kellen Moore. He leaves the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions, as their offensive coordinator, finally getting the job as a head coach. We were wondering what it was going to take for him to be an HC in the league, and now he's there in New Orleans. How do you think that whole thing's going to work out?
I think Saints fans were a little nervous when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, Jay. And Nick Sirianni gets up there and says, Kellen, let's run it back one more time.
Mm-hmm.
Saints fans have waited long enough to get a head coach. I mean, the
Right.
last team to hire a head coach, Kellen Moore, I think they're excited about him. On the surface, obviously, these offensive coordinators are hit or miss. You hope Kyle Shanahan is, more down that path for the New Orleans Saints. But, if you look at it, I tend to think Mickey Loomis is overrated in New Orleans. He gets too much
Right.
credit. Sean Payton is really the force behind the turnaround of that franchise. But Mickey Loomis did hire Sean Payton. And remember, when Sean Payton was hired in New Orleans, Jay, he was 39 years old. He had been fired by the Giants. The Cowboys gave him a second life. And if you look at Kellen Moore, really a similar resume. I mean, he's a guy that was fired by the Cowboys, ironically enough, is only 36, but is known around the league. And just ask the Eagles, the Super Bowl champs, he has been able to adapt. I mean, he goes to the Chargers and then the Eagles. So I think that there's optimism in New Orleans. There's a lot of things going on in the background, but in terms of their coach, it was crazy because the Eagles, of course, won the Super Bowl in New Orleans, and the Saints hadn't hired a coach. They were hoping Kellen Moore would be the guy, but I think they're relieved it's official now.
What do they have to do to get out from this cap hell, man? Because you look at some of the salary cap issues, and you hear a lot around the National Football League of, well, at least we're not what the Saints are,
Right.
at least
Right.
we're not doing what the Saints are doing. But I mean, my goodness, how are they getting? What players should we be keeping an eye on that they possibly will be moving on from?
I think anything's on the table right now. I
Right.
mean, you look at Taysom Hill, looks like he's not going to be back, and Sean Payton is just hoping
Wow.
that's the case. I mean, he's 35. A lot of people feel like Taysom Hill's a little younger. And frankly, speaking of maybe ex-Saints, Jameis Winston, I think a lot of people think he's older because he's been in the spotlight for so long, and we can get to him in a second. But it looks like Taysom Hill's days are numbered, and if they can maneuver that, they'll save $10 million in terms of cap space. I don't know about Derek Carr. I mean, if Derek Carr stays, I think it maybe will be for 1 year. Maybe they'll draft somebody. Spencer Rattler, I'm not sure how Kellen Moore feels about him. I mean, he did some good things at the end of last season, but he didn't win a game. And really, that's not his fault because of all the injuries. But when you talk about the salary cap and you look at players who are safe, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, besides that, I think anything is possible because they don't want to say the word rebuild, but at some point they have to because these cap numbers are just crazy in New Orleans. It's like that credit card we both had in our younger years that we just thought, we can slowly pay it off. Well, the interest rates are due in the Who Dat Nation right now, and they got to restructure.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I just saw a stat today that Alvin Kamara has never run for 1,000 yards in the
Crazy.
National Football League. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yet Najee Harris has run, I think, every single one of his years for 1,000 yards, and people view those two guys so differently. And we know how talented Alvin is, and especially out of the backfield catching the football. Yeah, I try to look at some of the pieces on this team and like who is part of that. You just mentioned some of the guys that are off limits, but I mean, those guys are getting up there. I mean, even I guess Olave is still technically young, but obviously we know he's dealing with injuries as well. who are some of the young players on this team that this squad is going to build around? Because you look at the other teams in the NFC South, and they're like, all right, well, I got this guy, and the Saints, they're still running Cam Jordan out there.
And Demario Davis isn't getting any younger. Yeah. And frankly, what makes it worse, Jay, is you don't re-sign Trey Hendrickson, who has a monster year and has been great with the Bengals despite the Bengals' problems on defense. And some guy named Zach Bond had a pretty good year in Philly, and he didn't get any better in New Orleans at all. They didn't see his potential. So, you look at this team. I mean, Marshawn Lattimore's not there anymore. They're going to save some money there. But, Paulson Adebo is a guy who was a pretty steady cornerback for them before last season. I don't know what his future is. You really break down all the segments. There's a lot of veterans there. There's a lot of aging players on both sides of the football. And back to Kamara, yeah, it is amazing he hasn't had 1,000 yards. It's really like Sean Payton's offense for so many years, though. The receivers, like the running backs, would share the load. He had to share it with Mark Ingram, and then he battled injuries and a lot of things on this offense that haven't been consistent over the years. But that's a great point. That's, to me, why, since Sean Payton has left town. Now, Jeff Ireland, he's behind the scenes in the front office for the New Orleans Saints, and, of course, used to be in the Miami Dolphins front office. He gets a lot of credit for that 2017 draft class. And think about that. You had Marshawn Lattimore. You had Marcus Williams, who was a great player. You had Ryan Ramczyk, who was an all-pro right tackle. You also had Kamara and Trey Hendrickson and Alex Anzalone. I mean, that's one of the best draft classes in the history of the NFL. But the problem, Jay, is they haven't drafted nearly close to that since. And that was 2017. That's approaching 10 years ago. So they haven't drafted well. They've moved up in the draft and made mistakes. They've let go of guys they should have kept, and they haven't signed big free agents. There's not a lot in that roster when you're Kellen Moore and you look at it that you really get excited about.
So there really are, and they. Do you think that's part of the reality of the situation, Mike? Is that they need to just really be honest with themselves and be like, hey, we got to really scrap things and maybe not, maybe you got to, because if you have reservations about your quarterback with Carr, shouldn't they just rip this thing down in the studs and really rebuild it? I know that may not be appealing to fans, but I think they would probably appreciate some transparency, because all you're doing is you're fighting an uphill battle, and it seems like the ceiling every year is 7-10 and 8-9.
They get rid of Derek Carr, though. It's over $50 million cap hit. And I think they look at him as well. He didn't get a lot of help last year because they had the injuries across the board offensively, from the offensive line to the skill players. I mean, he lost pretty much every starting wide receiver. I did a couple shows last year. I had to do some research on who the backup wide receivers were. I mean, who are these guys? I mean, for so many years, it was Marcus Colston and Lance Moore and Devery Henderson and Robert Meacham. And it just isn't that way anymore. I think, to your point, yes, the answer is yes. And you do it now with the new head coach and the fan base, you hope, will understand. And transparency is key. Just saying, listen, we have to make these moves now so they will pay off later. And you kind of hope Derek Carr can rebound a little bit. But at this point in his career, Derek Carr's who he is. I mean, he puts up a lot of numbers, but he's not a big red zone difference maker as a quarterback. And he hasn't done a lot of things this team had hoped for, getting that new start, because Dennis Allen had the familiarity with him with the Raiders. So, yes, as hard as it is to say, and as hard as they have avoided the R word, the rebuild word, I think now is the time, because we've seen it, though. If you can turn around quickly in the NFL. I mean, look at the Commanders and look at a lot of these teams. If you just take the Band-Aid off and you hope Kellen Moore's the right coach, like a Dan Quinn in Washington, you get that right quarterback and you sign a couple free agents. That's why we love the NFL, because it's not like a lot of other leagues where you have to wait a long time.
What do you make of the Buccaneers offseason losing Liam Cohen and, kind of not rebuilding, but just kind of getting ready and rearing to go for the 2025 season? You have confidence they'll be one of the better teams in the division in the conference again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jay, think about it. The Bucs should feel good when they look at the New Orleans Saints for a lot of reasons, because when Tom Brady left the building, when Bruce Arians left the building, I mean, the Bucs could have gone like the Saints. They could have picked the wrong quarterback. They could have drafted poorly. They could have signed bad free agents, but they got the right guy in Baker Mayfield. They've drafted really well. I mean, Tristan Wirfs and Bucky Irving, and we could go on and on. It just shows you how if you have a front office that makes the right moves. And Jason Light, to his credit, didn't start off well in Tampa, but has really turned it around. Ever since they won that Super Bowl, ever since they hired Bruce Arians, he acquired that draft mojo, whatever it is. Because if you look at his drafts before Bruce Arians came to after, is a huge difference. And I give him a lot of credit for being able to reset this organization after they win a Super Bowl, because how many times do we see it? I mean, we saw it in New Orleans. They had some good years after the Super Bowl, but when Sean Payton and Drew Brees left, it's been really hard for the Who Dat Nation in New Orleans to find a way to have optimism about this football team.
Drew Brees is going to be on the ballot next year for the first time for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I think it's a no doubt he'll be the first. He'll be a first ballot. What did you make of Eli not getting in? Do you think he makes it next year?
It's going to be tough, because it's, for a while in the NFL, I think this was kind of the year for Eli potentially, because he had some openings. I mean, I was surprised they only picked 4, but you're going to have some big names. And Drew Brees, I think, is Gronk's coming up too. I mean, you have some other big names coming. Gronk may be the year after Brees coming, but it's going to be interesting. I think Eli eventually is a Hall of Famer, but I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I don't like this notion some in the media say. I heard Deion Sanders say this: you got to have different floors. For
I don't like that
Hall of Famer. I can't stand that. If you're a Hall of Famer, you're a Hall of Famer. Why reduce that honor in any way? Why is Ronde Barber on a different floor if he didn't get in right away? I don't like that notion, but I think it's going to be tough for Eli, just because if you really break down his numbers, and you look at a guy like Drew Brees and he passes the eye test. Really, you think Drew Brees, you think Hall of Famer. I mean, obviously, we saw his brother Peyton Manning, and you see quarterbacks. I think Phillip Rivers will be an interesting candidate in a couple of years whenever he comes through. So yeah, I think Brees is a no-brainer. I was kind of disappointed when they had that, top 100 players, that Brees was in the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. That surprised me a little bit, just because of the numbers he put up. I mean, when you look at quarterbacks who've thrown for over 5,000 yards, I mean, he did it 5 times. It's insane. But he was never MVP, which is kind of hard to believe too. So I think it was the right move with Eli. I think eventually he'll get in, but I think Brees will be a no-brainer.
Mike, tell us about your book, man. Don't Quit, Pivot. I know you're always kind of on the forefront of just kind of keeping a mindset of being flexible, having options. Just tell us the inspiration for the book and what it's all about.
Well, really, I did it, so I wanted to help people do it. I think there's all kinds of motivations to write a book, Jay, and there's not a wrong motivation, but I think you have to be motivated by something. And I love the television business. I'm still a part of it. I have a lot of friends like yourself who are still active in the media, but the alarm went off in my head when I turned 50 that I had a lot of things I wanted to do with my life. And if I don't do them now, then I'm not going to do them probably.
Right.
So I went back to school, got my master's degree. I wanted to teach, and I've been a full-time teacher for 3 years. And as much as I love television, you've been a guest speaker in my classes. It's the best job I've ever had. It really is. I mean, the tangible effect that I can have with the kids and really use our experience to bring in guest speakers. Last week, I brought in former NFL head coach Jim Mora, who's 89 years old, from California, to talk to my management class. And he was phenomenal. And I could give you Booger McFarland. We did an event recently on campus. I brought Jameis Winston in. I mean,
it's so great.
We brought in a lot of different guest speakers, and then you have the media component to this too. I thought that I would teach in communications, but a friend of mine introduced me to the dean of the business school at Florida Southern College. So I'm teaching management classes, marketing classes, media classes. I taught an introductory to the business school class. The reason I'm telling you that is a big theme in this book, frankly, is that we all have skills. I mean, if your viewers today sat down and wrote out 5 skills that they have, I don't care if you're 21 or 81 or 91, we have skills and we take them for granted. And frankly, if we're unhappy in our career, we can use those 5 skills to pivot to happier workplaces. So I just wanted to really write about this. Dick Vitale wrote the foreword, and there's a lot of lessons in here, I think, that can go beyond just being happy in your career to get people motivated. It's funny, I went to high school with a class that I'm really close with, and one of my classmates reached out to me, and I'm going to speak to her sales team in a couple of weeks. So I've heard from a lot of different people, and it's been a great experience.
That's great, man. And I had so much fun speaking to your class. And it's always, my uncle teaches an entrepreneurship class for sports up in New York at Fordham University, I think it is.
Okay.
I should know. But yeah, it's so important. And I know our guy Rich Hollenberg does some stuff too for his break in breakthrough. Like, it really is important to be able to give these guys and gals an idea of what the future is like ahead if you want to get involved with sports or pretty much in any endeavor, but especially with sports, because there are so many variables. Like, you don't know what's going to hit you. And Mike, I know Don't Quit Pivot's such a great title for your book. And I know for me, like when I heard that, I was like, that's exactly what I was thinking about when I got let go. And I was like, I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to just let, negativity or any of this other like depression consume me. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make sure that I put my best foot forward every day to achieve the dreams. And this isn't just an obstacle that I'm not going to be able to, overcome. This is just, it's an adjustment. Like, you just move, like you say, you just pivot. And I think that's important because you see that in our business where guys lose their gig, man, and that's it. Like, you never hear from them again. And then they go and do another job. And you can just tell, like, they don't have the same passion for that job that they did when they were working in sports media.
Jay, I was laid off in the Tampa Bay market. If you count the NHL lockout as a layoff, when I worked around the Lightning, then I was laid off 3 times in 4 years. And I was laid off when both of my daughters were born. And it wasn't anything where I was fired. It was a layoff. It was just networks changed things up like iHeart. I mean, it was a circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no way I was going to let go of TV. And you have the passion. There's no way we're going to let one misstep change the trajectory of our careers. And frankly, I still have projects that I want to work on in television, but I want to speak. And the reason I'm writing this book is I want to inspire people, but I want to be able to speak to different universities around the country. Our campus is doing an event tomorrow where we're calling it You Are Not Alone, to let kids know, you know what? It's okay if you have no idea what you want to do right now. Right. But what's not okay is if you're not doing anything about it. I wish I had LinkedIn when I was in college. I wish I had the ability to reach out to so many people. And this book, when I wrote it, I sent it to a handful of authors that I really respect. One is Marshall Goldsmith, a 4-time New York Times bestseller. And another one is Dory Clark. She's a Wall Street Journal bestseller. They read the book, they liked it, and they've endorsed it. And it's a lesson in the book. And you know this, it only takes one to love you. We reach out all the time to people, whether it's guests on your podcasts or if you're working on a project. We have that ability now. And that's why the younger generation should really take advantage of that when they're looking for work, because they have the ability to really reach out to anybody right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm glad you said that, because I was up in New York this weekend at my my best friend's surprise party, and I was talking to his brother-in-law and his wife, and they were their son, 24 years old. I used to do baseball lessons with him years ago. He used to work on like the ice crew for the New York Islanders. And I said, well, what is he up to now? And they go, yeah, he doesn't really know. Like, he's still trying to find his way. And that just seems to be, I don't want to say a problem with this generation, but it just seems to be something that they're dealing with, where they have all of these resources at their fingertips, but they don't want to make the wrong move. They don't want to take the wrong step. And they're just so worried that if they do something, it's going to commit them, or they're just, whether it's a lazy narrative or whether maybe they've been coddled. Like, there's just so many different reasons, but it just seems like when I was growing up, if you didn't know what you were doing by 18 or 21, like you had to get a job. Like, there was no like waiting around living in mom and dad's basement. So I think that's another thing, as much as your book is for, people like myself that in his late 30s now, oh gosh, when something happens, you got to pivot, but it's also for the young guys and gals out there that don't necessarily what they want to do. And they kind of give up on their dreams because they think they're running out of time, or they don't think they have the resources. They have more than they think.
Well, you're big on this, and this is why you've been successful. You're great with people, and relationships mean something to you. And in the world that we work in media, you can't burn bridges, or and that's a lot of different arenas, but especially the media, because it's so small, there's not many jobs. Mm-hmm. I started a production company in 2009, and I've worked with over 50 nonprofits in the Tampa Bay area. I mean, the Humane Society of Tampa Bay is a big client. We've worked with Moffitt, and I could go on and on. But the first time I really thought about that, I was on a flight, And I don't know about you, I'm a social person. I get on a
Yeah.
flight sometimes, I just want to crash or
Mhm.
listen to music or whatever. I started talking to this woman, and she realized what I did, and I told her about my company. And at that point, we were just doing sports projects. We were just doing documentaries. And she said, you know what? I work for a nonprofit, and we're looking for an athlete to front a public service announcement for us. So I found a Saints player, and we did it. And boy, I just started thinking, you know what? I could do more of this. And
Right.
it became really the foundation of my career and enabled me to get through all the craziness of the media, frankly. And the funny thing is that woman is still a good friend of mine. She called me last week. She wanted to buy 10 copies so she could share it with her team. And she
Wow.
lives in a different state. If that is an example of why relationships are important, I don't know, because I can give you a lot in this book because they're everything. And you have to be good to people, and you have to care about people. And that's such a big part of being successful.
Mike, I say this all the time, but it's not what you know, it's who you know, isn't it?
Yeah. But you got to work
Yes.
to get to that point. I used to hate that. I used to hate that phrase. But
Mhm.
frankly, it's true. But you have to work hard and establish yourself and be good to people to be that person. If you know them, they're going to give you that opportunity.
Never stop loving what you do. Find other ways to do it. Don't quit, pivot. You can check it out on Amazon. I'm looking at it right now. The Breezeway, which I have, it's here somewhere. I got the Breezeway. It's part of one of my books as well. Read that as well. Mike Nabors. Go check him out on all social media platforms. It's up there. The Breezeway, baby. Good stuff there. Mike, a lot of in-depth conversations with Drew Brees during his Hall of Fame career, because he will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Again, get those books. One of the best guys I know. Mike, thank you so much for your time, brother. Great catching up. Let's do it again soon. And if you need me for class, let me know. I'm always there for you, pal.
Hey, I'll tell your viewers, your listeners, I had a lot of guest speakers, in my media class in the spring. And at the end, I asked them who their favorite one was. And you were the winner, my friend. I'm not just saying that because I'm on your podcast, but you're the real deal. I wish you all the best. You ever need anything from me, let me know. I appreciate it.
You're the man, Mike. Thanks, pal. Have a great week.
All right, you too, my friend. See you.
All right, buddy.